Attorney's office?
We have received, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 applicants, and it's going to the board on the 28th. The deadline is September 15th.
Very good. All right. So we're in good shape there. Citizens input.
There's something to hand to everybody. Can I just put a little file on each end and have them capture?
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Dave Kesselring. Dave.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm here today to present a positive change that's currently crucially needed. I urge you to discuss a revision of the county charter from countywide elections to single-member district voting for commissioners. I urge you to pass this on to the county commission for approval to be added to the next ballot. The formal change in the charter is contained in the document I shared with each member. The wording is simple. Each district's commissioner shall be elected by only the qualified electors residing within each commissioner's district. Sarasota made this change. It was so successful that a highly qualified grassroots candidate entering the race late almost beat a massively funded establishment candidate in the last election. Our county's growing and we have over 153,000 registered voters. Big money rules with countywide elections. Extremely expensive mail-outs and advertisements, many times sent out by PACs or other organizations, are currently a major contributing factor to elections in this county. With single-member district voting, a candidate has a chance to get to know his or her own constituents. They can actually personally share their message and platform with a large portion of their potential constituents. A higher percentage of voters can get to see who they're voting for face-to-face. Candidates can visit a much larger portion of voters door-to-door and can speak much more often at events targeted at smaller groups of voters. The cost of mail-outs can be lowered by 80% for a candidate. Now, each voter only needs to study a few candidates. They'll have a much better opportunity to question, investigate, and discern their candidates. It's time to allow more informed voters to elect their own representatives. That's what American governance is all about. We need a positive change in those that are elected to office. We need more grassroots candidates who lean toward constitutional governance and a respect of the individual rights of the people. What's needed is a candidate that understands the proper role of American governance and will leave as much as possible to the people themselves to invest, innovate, build, grow, and profit. When governing is properly limited, it costs much less to operate, and the revenue collected is a much lighter burden on the people. Candidates that support limited governance seldom have big donors, nor do they usually get the support of either major party or the media. Single-member districts give them a better opportunity to overcome these obstacles, run for office, and win elections. Anybody should be given the opportunity to run for office if they're willing to give up their time, effort, and finances to do so. Money does not somehow cause a person to be ethical, moral, or qualified to run for office. I'd venture to say the most qualified and best candidates have been passed over for decades due to the current structure of our election system. Single-member district voting can have a positive effect on our election system and our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on this citizens? All right. Stop the talk. Special presentation by our very own Emily Lewis. What can I tell you? Esquire, leading person.
Facilities, sheriff's infrastructure, what we need in order to grow and to maintain what we have. Those projects include needed infrastructure, and they're reviewed biannually through our board strategic planning process. That's part of our budget cycle. We also use the capital improvements program. That is a 5-year window of projects that are needed to be funded in our budget. Those are kind of the guiding documents that we use now, and we introduced that into our 2020 sales tax program cycle. We use those 2 documents to develop the county's recommendations for projects to be considered by the sales tax committee. And then in addition, we did a formal RFP in 2020 asking community organizations to submit the projects for consideration by the committee and by the county commissioners. There was a sales tax focus group that was established by the board in 2020 and has been used in previous sales tax initiatives. This year it was 21 members, so it was a larger committee. It was facilitated by an FGCU professor, kind of walked the group through the different projects that both the county and the community were presenting. That committee vetted 27 county projects and 4 external projects for consideration and made recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners for projects to be considered on both Tier 1 and Tier 2, which is how we kind of just prioritize the funding of projects. Tier 1, we typically, we're pretty conservative with how we estimate revenues to come in for sales tax. So for 2020, we used a very conservative estimate of $20 million annually to be collected, and that's how the committee developed their Tier 1 list. And then anything above and beyond that went on to Tier 2 for the board to consider. From the committee's work, there's a recommendation made to the Board of County Commissioners. Ultimately, by statute, the Board of County Commissioners decides what's the projects that are going to go forward to the voters for consideration. The board also, in addition to developing the project list, had to give staff direction on how long they would like to put this on the ballot for referendum. In this case, for 2020, they decided upon 6 years for a 6-year program. And then they selected the final projects in April of this year. There were 14 Tier 1 projects selected and 5 Tier 2 projects that would be funded if funding were available based on collections. And then again, the board approved the final ballot language that went to the voters for consideration. I think I skipped really quickly through the focus group, but I did want to mention that that focus group met 11 times over the period of almost a year, from August through March, August of 2019 through March of 2020. Just to run through real quick some of the projects that were selected for 2020 and again approved by the voters. For the schools, there was $5 million for school security upgrades. Infrastructure and utilities, there was water quality infrastructure that made it on both Tier 1 and Tier 2. The Family Services Center, Phase 2. Edgewater Drive, Phases 3 through 5, design and construction of Phase 4. Harborview Road. Under public safety, there is new Fire Station 17, which is slated for South County. Airport Rescue and Firefighter Training Prop, which is out at our public safety complex on Airport Road. The Radio Management Warehouse. The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office Administration and 911 facility, which will go over on Loveland in Mid-County. Fire Station 6 replacement. Fire Station 6 is out US 17 in the Cleveland area. And then Fire Station 3 replacement, which is a station that is over off 776 in El Jodine. And then the Sheriff's Office District 4 and Training Complex. Under Quality of Life for Tier 1, the Port Charlotte Beach Recreation Center is slated for a demo and rebuild. That is at end of life. The GC Herring Park, which is out in West County. The William R. Gaines Jr. Veterans Memorial Park, which is right over here off of Edgewater. And then a continuation of our bicycle, pedestrian, sidewalks, and trails that falls under our bicycle, pedestrian master plan. On Tier 2, we have vacuum stations, part of our water quality initiative. Those are vacuum stations that serve the entire utility, and it's in various locations throughout the county. The Sheriff's Office District 2 replacement, the Charlotte Sports Park renovation, replacement of South County Annex, which is on Taylor Road, also at end of life. Phase 3 of Edgewater Drive, and then the Port Charlotte Beach Park Pool replacement, and library renovations. And on library renovations, there were a number proposed by the staff. There were recommendations by the committee to take them in priority, with Tringali, the library out in West County of Tringali being the first, so the board stuck with that. Under the City of Punta Gorda, they have their own process for determining their projects. They also used a committee this go around, and they decided on these projects right here: the Public Safety Building expansion, Henry Street crosswalk, Henry Street sidewalk, Burnt Store traffic lights, US 17 improvements, ADA improvements, the drainage improvements at Boca Grande Avenue, Historic City Hall preservation, Freeman House preservation, Bayfront Activity Center, and Henry Street property improvements. So once the Board of County Commissioners has approved their final list of projects, that goes to the Supervisor of Elections. It's put on the ballot. In the past, there have been some legislative changes with sales tax statute over the years. In the past, you could take a sales tax initiative at both a primary or a general election. County has always opted to take it at general election. That has changed in statute. Now you have to take it at general election. You cannot take it at primary any longer. So we took this to the voters on November 3rd, 2020, and you can see the results here. It was approved overwhelmingly at 67.8%. So there's the results of the 2020. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You just mentioned about the primary versus the general election.
Yes.
A lot of times we, in reality, have a general election in August because there is no candidate of an opposing whichever position. Does that mean that it would be voted in August?
No.
So you would have to hold a special election where no candidates are running.
So there's still candidates that run at a general election. There's still initiatives on a ballot that happen at a general election. And generally, it's always going to run at a presidential election time. So with a 6-year program, we've always fallen into that cycle. But it would have to be on a general election. It could not be a special election or a primary by statute.
Well, they've declared the primary to be a general election when there is no candidates running on the general election.
You mean local party candidates?
Any party candidates. There's no one running from the opposing parties or independents running. The August election would be a general election.
I think you're making the assumption that there's no judges, there's no any other ballot initiatives.
Judges don't really run for office. They run to be removed from office.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Shaggy?
How come Punta Gorda only gets 10%? Are they not paying the tax over there or what?
It's based on revenue distribution that is outlined by statute. So it's based on their amount that they contribute. Generally, it's right about 10%.
Really?
So the question over here, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Pitts.
I'm sorry. For some reason, I thought it was based on population. I thought it was a capitation plan.
It's based on revenue distribution based on statute, I believe.
I think it is, I didn't bring it.
Okay, that's fine.
If you go to chapter 255 or 212-055, it will give you a reference to the revenue distribution piece of it. Yes, sir.
Punta Gorda gets 10%. What is the amount of tax money raised in Punta Gorda versus is it more than 10% or less?
Again, I'll have to defer to what the revenue distribution is. It's not really about what's raised, it's more about what's collected.
Yeah, well, I only say that because Punta Gorda Isles produces quite a bit of revenue with respect to the rest of the county. And for some strange reason, 10% doesn't sound right.
I think you have to look at sales tax collections.
I know. What I want to know, do the people in Punta Gorda buy more stuff, all right, pay more sales tax? Now, we're starting to see Punta Gorda getting bigger and bigger tax-paying entities over there where people will go shopping and more sales tax.
Sure.
So their contribution is only going to rise. It's not going down.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's a disparity among the distribution of the funds such that Punta Gorda doesn't get that what we call fair share. I don't, I use that as a euphemism, not as a, as a.
So there's a statutory basis on which it's done. They've gone through that, and I'm quite certain if Punta Gorda didn't think they were getting what they thought was fair, that they would raise
But
that.
I don't know if this, I don't see any numbers. If we could see numbers, I'm not questioning what they've done. I'm just asking how the distribution is going. Perhaps maybe they don't understand what they've done, and they could come up for another. Supposing they decide that they're not getting enough, and they decide that they want more, then what? And they go ahead and.
I think there would have to be a new referendum if it was approved the
Yeah,
way.
Well, I think they would have to go through the Department of Revenue process to re-look at their distribution formula.
So how does that work?
Well, what, is there a way you could get it?
That I'm not legally equipped to answer.
Is there a way for our next meeting that you could just maybe have the budget department show how they calculated those numbers, or
We could, yeah,
you just provide that to us? I
Yeah.
don't think you need to make a
Sure.
presentation. Just now.
we could do that.
And also, Dr. Pitts, you got to tie to this change of this body. So is it in the preview of the charter review to change that? And my attorney can advise me, but I don't think it is.
It seems like a statute, I mean, I haven't researched it, but it seems as it's a statutory manner in which all counties that utilize it would take place. So whether, I'd have to research whether we could take it up as an issue or not.
And what we brought Emily here for, I'm going to remind everybody, came from here and here, talking about the money that was given to the schools. And that's what Emily was here, you asked me to bring her here because of that.
Yeah, there was another
discussion.
issue too, I
Right,
had.
correct.
So I haven't raised it yet, but I will.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming. Knowing that some of these monies go to non-county entities, particularly the school board, and then we have one city, within the county, and I'm not sure what the status is of the Family Services Center, if they're independent or as a nonprofit. What measures are in place to audit all of these monies? The many, what was it, over 100 million over the years? I forgot that number.
430.
Yeah, 430. Particularly, if you know, can you explain the auditing process when it comes not only for the county monies, but those that go to the city and as well as the school board?
So all government entities go through the single audit process based on the revenues that we collect. For county capital projects, we do regular updates to our board, so they receive quarterly updates on sales tax projects. The projects themselves are audited through our normal fiscal auditing process.
You have jurisdiction over the school board?
No, that would be under their auditing process. Once we cut the check to them, it's up to them to manage the project, and it's up to their auditors to audit their books. So they invoice us, we pay the invoice.
Same thing with the city?
City, correct. They get their revenue share, we distribute it directly, it actually goes directly to them, it doesn't even come through us. It goes directly to them, and then they manage their projects, and they go through their auditing process.
So, because we were wrestling with this in our subcommittee, how do we know they're doing the audit of it with county tax dollars that go to these independent entities? It's not the school board raising the money. It's not the city of Punta Gorda per se. It's everybody. It's the tourists that come.
Right. It goes through our single audit. Our clerk is our auditor, so clerk audits all of the county expenses. With the city, that's through their audit process.
But I think, before you ask, I think what Emily was saying just before is, we don't get the money. It's sales tax money that's collected by the state, and the state directly distributes that to the entities. So it's...
Well, the school board, no. School board comes to us first, and then they invoice us, we pay the invoice.
But for
The city goes directly to
Right.
them.
So it was really never county money that went to the
I've got it.
city.
Yeah, I
It
think
went
right back here,
directly
and
to the city.
then I think.
Yeah, the thing that's come up in our committee relates to two things. One is the initial selection of projects, and people telling us that projects that were selected by the initial committee were knocked off, and there never was any kind of opportunity for them to argue back about those projects that were taken off the list. Do you know anything about that? That's number one.
I will start by saying I think there's a number of individuals who served on the sales tax committee, and from day one, it is made very clear that the ultimate list is decided by the Board of County Commissioners. This is an advisory board to the Board of County Commissioners. So the opportunity to weigh in on that is when the Board of County Commissioners was making their decision on final project list through public comment, or they have the opportunity to email their county commissioners. But the final decision is the Board of County
So
Commissioners.
they could have come to that meeting and have raised an objection to some of the projects being left off. Okay. The other issue was one of follow-through by somebody other than the commissioners and staff that would be outside of the government, that would be essentially commenting, for instance, if a project went over budget, and what happened in those regards? Has there ever been any discussion of such a body?
A separate body?
Yeah, well, it could be a component of the original committee who would have some follow-through to be advised on.
No, there's not an ongoing committee that looks at this. We do have, again, like I said, regular quarterly updates to the Board of County Commissioners on sales tax projects. So they are constantly looking at the project budgets if they come in over budget. You have to remember, and we talk with the committee up front too, about the fact that we're talking about projects that will be built 6 years down the road. So we're doing the best we can to estimate what those project costs might be, but there is definite economic issues at play that could, I mean, whoever saw a pandemic happening when we started this process and the cost of building materials going up like they did. So there are definitely, issues at play when it comes to budget, but the board watches those projects very closely.
I guess the question is, should there be an outside advisory board? That's the issue that's on the table as far as the committee discussions. That a number of people have raised that as a possibility.
Why you're here.
Yep, that's why we're here.
So real quick, Chairman, I'm losing track of people putting their hands up, so if you could watch for that and just let me know who's next, because I don't want to call anybody out of order. I know Mr. Schaefer's been waiting, and I keep seeing Mr. Fitz's hand, but then I thought you could just kind of keep track of it.
Mr. Schaefer, right now.
I was one of the people that asked some questions, and that's why you're here. So my question is different than what we've been talking about.
Okay.
The people who participate in receiving, then distributing, is the county and the city. There's no one else.
Correct.
Except the school district. But the one thing the county and the city have that the school board does not have, they have commercial payers, people who pay taxes and collect taxes, and those the school does not. So I see no reason that the school itself, or in the case of the airport, if they did, that they should participate, because they're not commercially or residentially paying taxes. They're not receivers of taxes. In fact, in both cases, they are tax exempt. So my question is, how do they get in as an equal partner, because they are one of the three partners, in on a tax that is for the county and shared by the city, regardless of how you separate? I want to get into the formula.
I'm not going to speak about what happened before I was with the county. I will tell you by statute, they are an allowable entity, and it actually calls out school boards in the statute. So I would encourage you to read that.
But they didn't make it mandatory.
No.
If we look at our taxes that we pay as citizens, and you're a citizen, half of your taxes go to the school.
Probably not a good example. I have 3 children in the school district, so I feel like I get mine.
Well, you see, I could say to you, because you have 3 children, you should pay 3 times as much. I mean, you're getting more
I
back
would argue
for
that I
it.
probably do.
No, I'm not. Whether I agree with what they teach is not relevant to the discussion. What's relevant is they have their own tax and their own special tax that they passed, and they didn't share it with the county. And the county, every time I see a sheriff or a policeman who's paid by the county or the city, crossing guards, the school doesn't pay for that.
No.
We pay for that. Why? It's their business. That would be no different than if someone's losing in their business, like our friend over at the airport authority who now doesn't have a building anymore. I should go over and compensate him because he lost something he wasn't even paying taxes on.
Okay, so
It's
what's
not
the
relevant
question?
in my eyes. It's not relevant in my eyes because they are not part of the collection or the production of the tax.
I think she
That's
answered
my
your question.
I think the question has been answered.
Yeah, it's by statute
Yes, sir.
that they're an eligible entity.
Eligible is different than
But it was
not
chosen,
required.
the board
They're
chose it.
eligible.
And the board chose
Mr.
it.
Pitts, you've been waiting very patiently.
The question is, with the $5 million that they requested, did the school board request it from the county, or did the county offer to pay for it? Because there was a whole bunch of discussions before any of this ever came to fruition. Okay, it was in the newspaper. The school board made it sound like if we don't have this, we're going to be inundated with people shooting up the neighborhood, and that was the background. Once it got into what they call the Overton window, where people would talk about it politically, all right? So I want to know, where did it start, all right?
The school board submitted as a part of the RFP process. That's how their proposal came in.
Oh, okay. So now they get the money. Is it thrown into their general fund, or do they have a separate fund just for the money that they requested? And that's why we need to know where the money went. Who gets it, how they spend it, all right? The question whether they're entitled to it is something entirely different, okay? And so I firmly believe that the school board, whenever they get any money, all right, generated by the referendum for the 1% sales tax, which is a county-wide thing, that they are obligated to give us an accounting financially of exactly where it went. If it went into the general fund, I'm a dead set against that. That money should be kept in a separate fund so they can't use money to go ahead, and which they did in the referendum, and they used the money that they weren't entitled to promote the referendum. And that was, all right?
So
The referendum aside, I didn't like the way it was funded.
Dive into school district financial requirements, because
You see,
I imagine that they're much like any other local government entity, required to have their own audit and generate their own audit reports. So I would start there.
I get that. And you're making, and I appreciate what you're doing. But we're here as a group to recommend to the commissioners to do things that may go counter to what you believe, okay?
What I believe is irrelevant.
I get it.
You gotta look at what
I
statute
get that,
says.
He's just
but,
answering questions.
You did make a couple of comments about, I think your question has been answered, and it may not be. That's something for you to say, but it's not something that we have to accept necessarily. And I don't, I'm not.
If I may, I think that's really a question for the school board, not for Ms. Lewis. You could do a public records request to the school board. I'm sure they have an audit report just like we do to be able to track it, but that really is, we can't comment
What
on that.
I'm saying is that if they're going to spend the money, all right, and we never get to see it, we don't know where it goes, I just want to know, is it in a separate account? They spent it on what it was supposed to be spent for, because there was an emergency need. You have to remember that. Well, everybody was so excited that the students were going to get shot. I take no exception to protecting the students under any condition, right? But if they're going to do this, I just think that we should have a paper trail, so if any questions arise, we can look at it. We don't have to say, oh, the state law, this and that, because that obviates the necessity of.
And I think your question is best proposed to the school board.
Emily, you keep referring to statute. Can you tell us the statute that you're referring to?
In your presentation, I gave you a handout for this, but
It's on
I'm
there?
going back up
Okay.
here.
So-
Very first slide,
Okay, thank you.
212055 subsection 2.
Thank you.
I sat on the sales tax for the last two sessions. The first one, there was no changes at all. The second one, it went to the board April of 2020, and there's not one person in this room that knew what was going on in this world at that point. This was shortly after. Our commissioners did make changes to it, and yes, after spending 6 months, it was frustrating for me. But at the end of the day, when you look at how many of our voters voted for it, it was, I remember, I believe it was in the 40s, 43% maybe, from in 2016 or 2014 when it went forward? 50? Okay.
0.4%.
Yeah, so 67.8% of our voters at the end of the day approved what the county commissioners made changes to. They were looking at trying to be as cost effective and conservative as possible. Those videos are available for everybody here. But the question at the end of the day, so much of this is Florida state statute. I think we need to move along because I don't know how this is affecting the charter review. It's a waste of time, frankly, to have this conversation here because we have no say. We can't override Florida state statute. Or can we, Rob?
Again, I'd have to research
Right.
specifically those.
Yeah, but my understanding is we cannot override what a Florida state statute is. And respectfully requesting an audit from the school board is not something that our charter can do.
Well, we don't know.
To that, and Rob, to that point though, when we get into like March, April, when we start to work on things for the ballot, when it deals with that funds coming from the county to the school board, could a recommendation from this charter review then go forward to the county commission and the voters dealing with that?
If we have a charter question that can address how funds go from the sales tax to the school board, if legally we can do that, theoretically, yes.
The other issue on that, Bill, I just want to follow on that. I've seen reports that also include just general recommendations that were outside the chart that just came up in discussions, just to give information to the commissioners. So I presume that we're able to do that, correct? You say it doesn't have to, say it's not going to result in a charter amendment, but we want to just make the commissioners aware of an issue that came up. We can include that in our report. That's what I want to make
Ms.
clear.
Amber's been waiting patiently and then I'll come to you, Mr. Shaker.
Thank you very much. To your knowledge, is there anything in the statute, the 1% statute, that precludes the county from having the advisory committee continue with some form of advisory oversight? Getting back to Ms. Murtha's question a while ago. To my knowledge, there isn't anything that would preclude the county from continuing that.
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill, done?
I keep seeing hands pop up.
I just want to be right where I started this, the last meeting. My question is it mandatory
No.
that the school board participate? They started at 2.5, now they're at 5. Next time they'll be at 10. It's like the children, when they get to an age they can spend money, they always need more.
It is not
In the
mandatory, but it's at the
same
discretion of the
period
Board
of
of County
time,
Commissioners.
they put in their 1 cent, their 1% tax on every piece of property and every taxpayer here, be it commercial or residential. That's a lot of money, a lot more money than this. So it's not necessary. So those numbers, 5 million, is an arbitrary number. It's not specific to dealing with a capital improvement. They could say they used it anywhere, but all it did is release their money from their project and put these 1 cent sales tax money in its place.
Okay, so your question was, is it mandatory? The answer is no. Yes, sir.
I sat on previous
Oh, they did?
advisory boards, and I understand that's our role, it's advisory. Commissioners certainly can amend and maybe from other input as well. That's not my issue. But when they finally decide, they're passing an ordinance, correct?
It's a resolution.
List of projects. The public is welcome to come and speak and say yes, no, maybe we don't like this project, we don't like that. I didn't hear any of that, the comments you're making here. I did not hear any of that come to the BCC when they were deciding those projects. So, I'm sorry, what is your question?
So then, are the projects codified with the authority of the
No.
commission behind it?
No, they are not. And that's what enabled the board to, at one point, I think it was Placida Road, they changed.
It's the Placida program. It was slated to be, I think it was to be Canoe, and they changed it to Placida. They have discretion to do that because it is, again, public infrastructure. But I will say, under the county's projects, again, we meet quarterly with the board. They are very involved in reviewing and monitoring the progress of those projects.
And I would add, even though they're not codified, that list of projects, the board could theoretically change, and they did. I've been here for 20 years, and that's the only time one project that changed, and it was based on the need at the time. The Board of County Commissioners and county staff are very sensitive to the fact that the sales tax was voted on and approved by the public based on the concept of these are the projects that you are doing. So they take that very seriously, and I know I'm speaking for the board.
How about the other entities? And I think that's what the issue is. Yeah. You give $5 million to one entity, and and I sat on those boards, and or one of them, in the previous one, and it sounds good. We need security. Yeah. How much? And we approved that. And boy, I hate to think that I'm not suggesting that's taking place, but if there's no enforcement behind it, how do we know they're not doing a swing and bit, a bait and switch?
With all due respect, the enforcement is supposed to come from that entity. So it's the school board that should be enforcing. They sent us a letter. This is our request. This is the specific dollar amount we need for fencing, for cameras, or whatever it is. They provide that to the county. The county blesses it. We look at the numbers and say, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. How'd you come up with that? You ask questions. The county blesses it. The voters blessed it. The place for enforcement is the citizens, you all, if you have questions, going to the school board meeting and asking those questions of the school board. And they should be able to provide it.
Just a quick comment. There was sales tax money for the widening of Placido Road. The residents did not want that. That money ultimately wound up going into Bird Store Road.
Yeah, I
and
thought
everybody
it
was very happy
Thank you.
with that.
Thank you.
This is the last question.
Yeah, you have to remember when they came up with the security, the amount that they requested was a number 5 times or 4 times what they accepted. That's number one. And number two, now we're talking about human infrastructure. I would like infrastructure to be completely determined, we can't just use infrastructure as a word meaning, ubiquitous for anything and everything. We have to define infrastructure, and that's what I think. Okay?
It is laid out in the statute. I should have brought you all copies. I can forward that to you, Rob, if you want, or we'll provide you that and also whatever the information it is that you asked for, Emily, and you can circulate that.
Well, we thank you both.
Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome.
Very good discussion, guys. Actually, good questions, too. All right.
Thank you, sir.
How's the subcommittees
I don't
coming?
take it personal.
I'll start.
Okay, all right. Any of the subcommittees finished, or? No? Okay, no, I'm just checking. That's one of the questions I have to ask.
We met with all of our, this is the Constitution, we've met with them. We're going to have maybe 1 or 2 final meetings in the next month or so, and then we'll be finished.
Okay, great. The thing I want to remind you is obviously come toward the end of January, February at the very latest, we got to have all that done. Only because then we're going to start to work with Rob here and everything to start together, putting together, if anything, what we want to send to the county commissions for the voters. And that takes a little bit of time, believe me, it does. Everything that was printed, like the stuff from Mr. Kesselring today, that'll be here in the back part of my binder, and we will, at that time, we're going to discuss every issue, including the issue that we talked about in here today. We get an up and down vote of how we'd like to proceed with that. So nothing's going to be swept under the rug, which I've heard before in the past. Okay, with that, we have a statement from Big Law.
Did
I miss something?
I think you want to just go through each committee real quickly. Just
Oh, yeah, do you?
that
I'm
committee.
sorry, go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I'll be quick. We're about halfway through our interviews, so we're moving along really quickly. But I only want to bring up the record.
Other boards.
Other boards, sorry. Yeah, I just want to bring up a couple of issues that raised for the record. Campaign financing came up, restricting monies on campaign fine for local campaigns. This is a concern. So kind of ties into what David was bringing up. Another issue that came up, that was different, was minimum age requirements for serving as a commissioner. That hadn't come up before. Another
Like they're
was,
too old?
pardon me?
mean like
Too
they're
old. The opposite. That's a good point too. But anyway, the other one that came up were residency requirements. Apparently, and I didn't check this, so forgive me, I didn't get a chance, but that there's no residency requirement that's strong enough. They felt that was strong enough. So that came up. Number of months that you're actually living in the county before you're able to run for office. And the other issue related to the airport, because we interviewed airport commissioners. So we had people raise issues with the commissioners, and one that came up was the relationship with Charlotte County and the airport, and how the state can, can legislate conditions for who the commissioners are, who the composition, I should say, the composition of the commission, and without the county having any kind of say in that. And that was raised as an issue, as to whether there should be some requirement for the county to have a say in any changes that would affect the airport and its composition.
Well, when you make your report, put that into that.
I will.
It's a thing we can obviously discuss.
Okay.
Administrative staff?
Yes, we have interviewed almost everybody. We just basically have utilities, the deputy county administrator, and the county administrator left for our interviews. There have been some recommendations but our committee has not met to discuss yet. We're just going over the interview process.
Can I ask if there are any issues coming up because one of the reasons I'm bringing mine up now is in case, as people do interviews, they want to raise these kind of issues with other groups. So are there any things that came up in your committees that could be raised with other groups that we're still interviewing?
It was more for our committee, and
I don't know if there's anything generic.
no, residency actually came up in ours. We already did talk about that too. But I may have the wrong notebook.
We did talk about term limits.
We talked about term limits. We talked about residency with our county commission, or our county the leadership. And I'm sorry, I don't have the actual notes. We were looking at it with the home rule. There was talk about what had happened in the 2020 election, how somebody from Northport ran for clerk of court.
Yeah.
And there was, so there was talk about there's no enforcement in here, and that actually did go before the county commissioners. And it was actually at the end of the budget meeting, that April 2020, and anybody else who was up at 8 o'clock at night watching the commissioners meeting saw it. But Polstamoulis had come up. And forgive me, maybe Steve or Sai, you can remember, but I think that there was an enforcement, or that was allowed. They came back later on.
So because I was the charter review attorney prior charter review commission, I got
The question.
invited into the discussion, let's say. Basically, in that case, the supervisor of elections position is, if you fill out the forms and say that they are correct, he takes them at face value. It is not his job to decide if they are correct or incorrect. It is also not the county's job, because this is an election that's run under the auspices of the Division of Elections. The party withstanding would be the candidate that was running against him to challenge in a lawsuit whether that person was duly qualified to run for that office. The question then becomes, is the court going to take a case like that, because they haven't been elected, so it may not even be an issue in dispute at that time.
I believe, wait, if I could, before we go on, we brought that up. Steve, Sai, help me out. I thought there was because that was what was said in that board meeting, in that county commissioners meeting. I believe that there was an update. Didn't they say, didn't Jeanette Knowlton say that there was an update? I would have to go back on that, and I don't have that right here.
It's just the opposite. There was not an update.
There was not an update, okay.
The issue arose in the constitutional officers subcommittee as well, and it was raised by a constitutional officer who ran into this. And the question was phrased to us, because it is specifically in our charter, I believe it's section 3.2, was what was cited, is who enforces our county charter. And that's how it was phrased to us as to who does enforce the county charter, to the point where I think that would be an excellent presentation for this group, is who does
But
enforce
that's-
the county charter.
That would be enforced by the candidate who is alleging a violation of the charter.
I'd like to broaden the question. The question is broader as to if there is a violation of our county charter, whether it's that provision or any provision, who enforces that? And I think that's really how it was brought to our attention.
I have no legal background, so I'm just going to talk of the other 20 counties that are in the same position we are. Seems to me a elected official should not make that decision because they have a dog in the race.
Yeah.
However, we have a legal department here, and we have a county administrator here. And there is no reason that within that group that they can't create a 3-person decision and say, you're not qualified by our charter. It's that simple. And order the supervisor of elections to take them off the ballot.
I will
According to
disagree.
the rules.
Well, if the full committee wants, research at the time that you want to see about enforcement provisions in the charter. we
Well,
can
that's
certainly
one of
do
the
that.
things we're doing.
The other suggestion, and this came from our budget director and the county attorney both mentioned this. In 2010, there was a change that we have a 2-year budget, and the cycle for when they do a process of the review of the budget, just have them line up, because right now they're still doing them annually, and that change was made after. So it's just kind of keeping everything in line, just cleaning up from one of the last budgets. So we'll have the verbiage exactly right now. I believe that was at SI, Steve? Great.
40 County Commissioner.
Yes, our next meeting is, and Andrew, correct me, September 22nd, 11 a.m., correct? Here? And we're going to start off by interviewing Dave Kesselring, Economic Development Director. And just what we have been doing is working on a list of issues. Now, all these issues won't apply to every person that comes before us. And certainly this board in the past, or this subcommittee has interviewed economic development, county administrator, the commissioners, and some others to get some input as well. And some of these are from the past, term limits. We did do some research and find out we can't limit term limits. We have jurisdiction on that over the school board because some charters do, just by way of information. But also the Florida House has passed legislation, term limits on school boards in Florida.
There's no term limits.
No, there isn't right now.
No.
Well, some counties do on school boards, I'm saying that. So that's one of the things when we talk to the commissioners.
County can do that, though?
No?
Is it the school board? I didn't think it had jurisdiction over the school board, the county.
Charters do address that. There's some charters that do.
Who did you say you're interviewing next?
Economic
Well, we're starting off with economic development.
We actually interviewed Dave Gammon because he's part of the staff. That would be under our committee.
Right, but he also works for the Board of County Commissioners. And the last time this subcommittee interviewed him, because we have an issue too, we're going to talk to the commissioners, should he remain as part of the legislative branch or go back to where he had been years ago? Part
So
of the
are you
executive branch.
interviewing all the staff? Because that's what this committee is, that we're on.
No.
Well,
Our county administrator, deputy
you interview
county-
him, we'll interview him, and then we'll share our, the Board of County Commissioners did this the last time. We're just following the same practice.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah. And we're going to be interviewing some of the same people for
It's
different
not
reasons.
about that.
yeah, all right, it'll work. Trust me, in the end, Robert, and I'll tell you, it will work.
Yeah, the more the better. Also, we're going to look at the number of county commissioners. Our charter doesn't have a provision. If we want to change it, we have to proactively go ahead and change it, where it's not based on population. You know, when we had 100,000 people, we probably had 5 commissioners. Now we have, 180,000 people, and we have 5 commissioners. So we're going to talk about that. I'm not saying we're going to recommend that, but when we put our heads together and say, what are some of these issues that other counties, I mean, we have to put here what other counties are doing. Our charter is very thin. We don't address a lot of things. And you can tell by the conversations, maybe it's time we do. How elected? We're going to raise that issue again, as was presented today by the public input. You know, single district versus at large, some combination. We're going to discuss it. I don't know what any recommendation will be. We're going to talk about partisan elections, but we can't do that with the county, with the school board, because by statute, it's nonpartisan. So that's off the table. And we have no jurisdiction over any political subdivisions, no city or towns that exist within the county. But we'll discuss that. In line of what Pat was bringing about, what some charters are doing, you know, who's guarding the hen house? Certainly not the foxes. And what they're starting to do is have citizen boards, whether you're calling them citizens' Bill of Rights, ethics boards, you know, we're going to look at that and see, you know, do we need an outside entity of citizens? We have boards for everything else in this county made up by citizens who volunteer and they work. You know, is that a possibility? We want input from, you know, the commissioners and others on that.
Is that a general board that you're talking about? Like it might include the sales tax issue? Is that, or is it something specific?
Well, if somebody has a complaint that the charter's not being followed, who do they go to?
Just
who do they go to?
for the charter, okay.
Yeah. And if it's a commissioner who's a violator, who do they go to? You know, and certainly you want local government to remain local. You don't want people having to go to Tallahassee for our issues. We should be able to resolve. Again, we're just looking at it. We're not saying we're going to do anything. But let's have a conversation. And there's some other issues to the citizens' initiatives. This came up the last time. You know, what does it take for citizens to propose an ordinance? We're one of the highest percentage, well, we are the highest percentage in the state. We require 10% of our voting population. Most of all the others, except 2 or 3, they go 5 or 7%. Just for more citizen involvement. I'm not saying we're going to do it, we're going to look at it. Another thing is, we noticed that our charter is silent on vacancies. What happens when there is a vacancy in the commissioner? So we're going to look at that. You know, maybe the state law now has it where the governor will appoint somebody temporarily. And I think that's what happened the last time when Commissioner Duffy was appointed. Because we lack a procedure. But other counties have procedures.
Is that in statute? That particular piece?
So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
But we are free
With the
to
judge too.
have our own, be in home rule charter, our own, if we want to. I'm not saying we're going to.
Apropos of partisan elections, this coming, when the legislature meets, what is it, November? One of the questions they're going to take up is making all elections partisan. So we might talk about partisan elections here at this, but it may be a moot at that point.
Well, I thank all of you. It's a lot of work, trust me. It's a lot of work. I appreciate everything you guys do. Truly appreciate it. And now comes time we got to pay the piper over here with our outstanding attorney.
Again with the every month.
Every month. What can I tell you? To have a motion to approve this bill.
Has he got a fixed income like we are?
Yes, I stand by.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I got it. And a second? And a second with bill. All right. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Anything else we want to talk about?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Make it quick, whatever it is.
Can't make it quick. I have an issue with Sunshine as it is described that I was sent this.
Oh.
And I have comments that I have heard from people where I believe, my opinion, and based on what I see here and the advice given, I agree. But because it's advised, not law, because it hasn't been tried, there's a problem. So if a few of us are sitting together and we talk about what goes on in here, but only one of us talks, and the other 1, 2, 3, or 24 listen, but it's not a publicized meeting, is that a violation?
Yes.
That is a violation. But I have heard public officials say, if you don't say anything, then it's not a violation. The fact is, you're listening, and you know what the other commissioner, or whatever they happen to be, feelings are, which would lead you to believe on how they're going to vote when it comes before them.
Well, the advice that we used to give was, if you are at a private function, say a homeowners association or a political association, whatever, and one member of the board that you serve on is there, we always advise that you could listen. That was the way it was 10 years ago. There have been concerns about that, and Pat Gleason is the guru of sunshine law in the state of Florida and open meetings. And Jeanette consulted with her in preparing that memo, and the current thinking is that you should absent yourself from that conversation so that you do not bring yourself into the possibility of having a complaint filed against you.
The only thing I see from Janine's comment is she puts the responsibility on the non-speaker to leave. There has to be an equal responsibility to the person speaking not to speak. Well, no, if you're asked a question, it's very simple. You just turn around and say, look, that might come before the board. There's another commissioner here. I can't talk to the subject. It's that simple.
Well, I think,
and that would include all of us as well.
There are times when several of you may be invited to speak to an organization about what goes on in this organization, and somebody else might be a member. If you,
that's the rules.
Well, they can choose to speak, and then you know not to be there if they're speaking.
Absolutely correct. But all I'm saying to you is that I don't think anybody will disagree with what I said, because unless you're deaf and you can take your hearing aids off, you can sit there until the cows come home.
I would want to exit the meeting because I would not want to have to defend that with my hearing aids out.
You're right. Absolutely.
Under Mr. Schaefer's belief that nobody can talk to anybody because sooner or later they may run into. The point being is that if it's in the public discourse and normal people might see it on television or read about it in the newspapers, particularly stuff that's already been discussed and voted on, having two commissioners speak to the same problem, or subject, without going any further than what is publicly in the public square, should be certainly more than adequate cover. I mean, I don't understand.
That's your opinion. That's not what the statute is. The statute is anything that's going to come before your board is.
Supposing we're going to do something about climate change, and I say, it's raining today, and you say, and the next thing you know, we're going to be talking about raining. We can't talk about raining. It just gets to the point.
Jeff's at the same meeting. He sees you two talking and files a complaint. Then that's what happens. The first thing is, and that thing that came up with the Republican file, they asked me to go speak as president of the Board of Realtors, and he threw it in there when he set up that I was also the chairman of this commission, and I told him, I said, I am not speaking on that at all. I'm not going to. No, real quick.
Yeah, in fact, I had suggested Bill come to one of our clubs. Now, I've ordered a meeting. In fact, there's other members in here that belong. Certainly, if Bill's going to come and talk about what we may be talking about, I understand I don't leave and go out to another area for that duration. I understand you're going to talk on several issues. But if Bill just came and introduces himself and says, here's what our goal is, and here's some of the things we've done in the past that ended up as referendums that got passed. If you have any questions or have any suggestions, see me privately. If he doesn't talk about prospectively, see, and I don't know what they, I suggest to you, somebody reached out to you to come to our club at the end of the month.
Again, it's advice. Each one of you will be on your own legally if you have a complaint filed against you. The advice is to exit the meeting and not be present when it happens. You don't know where it's going to go when the comments start, but you all are grown adults and can make your own decision and may have to defend that decision before someone else.
And lovingly, I just,
Now, that's a rough one.
we keep referring to county commissioners. You're talking this commission. We are the commission.
Yeah.
So it's us, I just, some people are,
All commissions.
correct.
All boards, all.
But right now, we have to worry about ourselves and making sure that we're following
So
something.
do the other commission people.
Right now, I worry about us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Let's go.
All right.
Drive the neighbors.